Sheila in Kentucky, thanks so much for your patience. I meant to take your call earlier, but welcome to the show.
Hi, Matt and Paul.
Hey.
I'm in ICU right now. My husband is, he had open heart surgery and he's had complications and he's been here about 8 days.
Wow.
And I'm really at a point where I need comfort and I need support. I'm trying to keep myself positive and to keep myself from sinking into despair. And I'm doing a pretty good job overall.
Yeah.
But, yesterday, one of my relatives, who is a retired nurse, she told me that, I know you don't want to hear this, but you need to pray and to call out to God, because non-believers, which my husband and I are both atheists, non-believers don't recover as quickly in her experience. So she's implying that if I don't pray and if I don't call out to God, that somehow I'm to blame for my husband's decline. And if he doesn't recover, it's my fault. And I'm so fucking pissed because she's preying on my vulnerability and she's trying to bring me back into the fold when I'm at this weak point, and I'm never, ever going back there. It's taken me decades to break away from the brainwashing. And I just wanted to call just to say how fucking angry I am. And I just need support. And this is what I get.
Yeah, you should be angry. The one thing you can take comfort in is that this retired nurse is actually retired, which means she's not spreading this bullshit to other patients at the hospital and is instead, plaguing you. There are studies, and so she's not completely nuts. There are studies, like the Templeton Foundation did studies on intercessory prayer, and I believe that was specifically with heart patients. And if you care to actually engage with her, you could point out that in that study from the Templeton Foundation, that they found that if patients knew they were being prayed for, they did worse. Mm-hmm. And that there was no statistical significance between the prayers, the intercessory prayers, who they came from or who they were directed towards. The in-group and the out-group did functionally the same, and the only group that did worse were the people who knew they were being prayed for. Now, is your husband conscious at all?
Yes, I'm right here with him now, and he knows I'm calling you.
Well, tell him, first of all, and you probably heard I had a triple bypass in December, and I was very fortunate. I was only in the hospital for about 4 days. They did 3 grafts. They finished the operation in like 4.5 hours or so. I was on bypass during it. They let me go home 4 days later, and about 2 days after that, I stopped taking the high dose pain medication that they gave me. I've been slowly recovering. It's now been about six months this week, because mine was in December. I work out in the yard. I'm doing stuff around the house. I'm moving. I'm still winded and weak. But the people who know what's best aren't a registered nurse who wants to use anecdotal information from their experience to try to affirm prayer, but the doctors that have actually been taking the best care of your husband that they can. And I'm very sorry that he had complications. But every time, I'm assuming, since he's still here and he's conscious, every time he had complications, there was a medical expert there who evaluated the problem with no appeal to a God. I don't know if they appealed to a God, but no God intervened to say, oh, here's what went wrong. We've done this dosage wrong or whatever. This is about people. And I don't get mad at people when they want to thank God that, so-and-so survived. I just wish they'd also thank the people who actually did something. You are absolutely, in my view, completely justified in your anger. I would be livid if if your husband's anything like me, he'd probably get up and walk out of this place if the hospital, people were actually doing this. But because it's a family member, it is absolutely, well, I don't want to say it's completely vile, because the person who's telling you this is a victim. They are a victim of religious indoctrination and religious thinking. And what's happened here is they care about you and they care about your husband. For some reason, because of their religious indoctrination, they're far more worried about your eternal soul than your life here on earth, because this life is like filthy rags. And as long as they have that mentality, I would not allow them in the room. I would say, if you'd like to pray, go pray. But the evidence is not on your side, despite what your anecdotal experience is. And we're not convinced. And by the way, how insulted would a God be if a couple of atheists in a time of trouble just start praying to God for help? Doesn't that play right into the no atheists in foxhole paradigm that we've all been arguing against for decades?
Yeah.
You go ahead and get pissed. And if you need to tell her to leave, leave. And you just continue to stay there and be supportive and loving to your husband and interact with the actual medical experts. Because when my brother and Arden were there by my side in that hotel room, and for the months afterwards during recovery, that was the most important thing to me. I knew people were out there praying for me. Some of them were praying that I'd die. Some of them used my illness as an opportunity to leverage for their, this wouldn't happen to you if you'd have been a vegan or whatever else they did. And I just set all of that bullshit aside because I was able to sit there in that hospital bed, joke with a nurse every now and then, hold hands with the woman I love, interact with my brother, who's my favorite person on the planet. And all of that got me to where I could get up and walk in a couple of days. I understand your husband's in a more difficult spot. We want the best for him. But part of the best is not allowing toxic influences into the room to poison a mindset, an atmosphere. It's not like vibes or anything, but if there's hostility between people, that's not good for you, which means it's not good for him. So kick him the fuck out.
Yeah. No, they're not here. She's in another state far away. This is what she texted me.
Yeah.
And, but
tell her she can text you in 6 months.
And if I can just add, so if I can just add a very similar story just to reinforce for you what's happening. So a couple of months after I deconverted, and it became public that I deconverted, I was diagnosed with a very aggressive cancer. And you can, of course, imagine that the Christians in my life all came to me and said, well, this is your punishment for, for deconverting. And all you need to do is come back and this cancer will go away. And so for the exact same study that Matt just cited, I went to my Facebook page and I cited that same study that said, if I know that you are praying for me, clinically, I'm going to do worse. So please, if you care if I survive, just please, if you're praying for me, do not tell me. And that was very effective, at least in my community, for them to lay off. And the other thing, you mentioned this nurse, sister, I forget if it was your sister or a relative of yours. Because I was in the hospital for so long getting my chemo and radiation, I had a lot of chance to talk to nurses and doctors. And because I was so freshly deconverted, I was really curious about all these miracle claims that I was hearing, things like that. And to a person, the medical staff would say to me, well, you know what? Our policy around here is if the people think that they are getting a miracle, we're kind of instructed to just play along with it and acknowledge it and say that it is, because that when they think that they're getting a miracle, they're going to do better, right? They think that they're in God's grace and all that kind of thing. I would just encourage, if you have a chance to talk to the medical staff, just talk to them about some of the miracles that if they've really seen them, or if in fact this is just sort of the confirmation bias where we're self-selecting the positives, and the times where it didn't work out, they're just ignoring that, right? The medical staff, and to echo what Matt said, I just learned to thank the medical staff, because so often everything good that they do gets attributed to God. Like, can you imagine going home at the end of the day and you saved someone's life and you did some great things, and all that credit went to God. So while you're there, thank your medical staff who have been trained for years and years and years to deal with this very specific section. As Matt said, ask the people who are praying for you. You can thank them if you want to, but you can just ask them not to let you know, because it's just going to add stress, both to you and your husband. And go from there and know that you're not the first one. You're not going to be the last one. And I'm so sorry. It sucks so much. It was so awful. And I can't imagine living through it again. So I'm really sorry that it's you this time. but there is hope down the line.
I have a couple
Well,
other.
I
I have a
appreciate
couple
it.
other things for you, Sheila.
Okay.
The snarky me is going to give you some tools. So first
I
of
don't
all,
mind snarky.
this retired nurse that's telling you to pray, do they have a spouse?
Yes.
And their spouse is also similar in their religious views?
Yes, and also a nurse.
Awesome. And so are they praying for your husband?
Yes, but I don't tell my husband that.
No, that's fine. He couldn't stop them. And if they want to spend their time doing that instead of helping, at least it keeps them quiet or away from me for a while when they're praying. But Matthew chapter 18, verse 19.
Matthew,
says,
what was that again?
Matthew 18, 19. It's just Matthew 18, 19. We'll go with the King James. It says, again, I say unto you that if two of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them from my Father which is in heaven. Which means when she tells you to pray, why would your prayer be necessary if she and her spouse are already praying? Because that means there are two people who are in agreement on something, and all they have to do is pray, and the Bible says that God will make it happen. Why would they need to add your prayer? Well, what kind of weak ass God needs more than two people to pray to him? It's not, it's
Exactly.
unbiblical.
And the other thing is, we die. Human beings die. No amount of prayer can stop that. Every single person on this earth dies. Prayer doesn't do fuck.
Yep. I tell you, I don't envy the position you're in, Sheila, but I tell you this, the fact that he's laying there conscious next to you after the surgery and the complications is a testament to the millennia of scientific progress and discovery, and the abilities of the physicians and the physicians that came before them. I just saw a picture of a doctor who did a 27-hour heart operation, I think, in the 80s, and then sat there overnight with the patient. We have come so far, and somebody, no matter what happens to your husband, when he walks out of there, somebody's going to claim it's because they prayed to God. And
Right.
I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of thinking that I joined them in that prayer. I'd rather pit science against God every day, because science is going to win every time.
I agree. And every time they tell me that to have faith in God, I say we have faith in our doctors, physicians, and all the health professionals. We have faith in science, and we believe in them. And I thank every single medical professional that comes in this room,
Awesome.
every single one. And I've gotten on the phone and I've called in to thank them, because that's what it's all about. There's no fucking magical God in the sky. And I'm sorry, I just got so angry and I felt so down, and just listening to you guys has brought me up, and I needed that.
Good.
And I
You're
appreciate
very
it.
welcome.
Go give that man a good squeeze on the hand. Let him know that we're all that none of us here are praying for him,
No,
but
yep.
all of us can't wait until he walks out of the hospital to tell his story of not only an amazing scientific procedure, but the bullshit that the religious heads threw at him throughout it. I can't wait to hear. Have him call in.
Fuck yeah, I sure will. Thank you guys so much. Have a great
You're welcome.
night.
Thanks, Sheila.
All right.
Oh man,
That sucks.
it's all of this stuff, and it hits close to home. And of course, one of our co-hosts, Dave Warnock, is essentially dying of ALS, and there's a lot of difficulties in life, and what religions often do, and I will credit them with this only slightly, is that religions are successful at providing people comfort in times of difficulty. The problem is that I think what it's providing is false comfort.
Right.
It's like saying, oh, don't worry about it. Everything's going to be fine. God's got you, or everything's going to happen according to God's plan. And so if someone survives, it's because people prayed. If someone dies, it's because God said your time is up.
Yeah.
This is a win-win scenario for a God, without ever demonstrating that a God exists or has done anything.
And of course, religions thrive where there's the most suffering, which is one of the reasons why it's not doing so well in developed worlds, when people don't need as much comfort and as much, when we're looking after ourselves largely, we don't need it as much. And it makes me really sad when suffering is preyed upon like that. That's very disgusting. Please don't do that.